All right, so the federal government was talking earlier today about cyber threats to Canada's elections, and it was critical of social media companies. So what are the specifics there?
That's right. So we heard a briefing this morning from the head of the Communication Security Establishment Canada's cyber spy agency, as well as two cabinet ministers, talking about foreign state actors principally, but certainly foreign rather than domestic threats. So we were talking this morning about action against domestic extremist groups and hate messaging. This is more about protecting Canada's election from the kind of interference that we saw in the U.S. presidential election in 2016, although there was some talk again of a lack of cooperation from social media platforms. And Karina Gold, Minister of Democratic Institutions, one of the two ministers we saw there, did say that Facebook has been somewhat more cooperative than others such as Google and Twitter, and of course it's Facebook that's taking action today on this other domestic front. But she expressed frustration generally, Andrew, with the lack of cooperation that Canada's been getting from all of the big tech actors when it comes to cracking down on foreign state actors trying to interfere with Canadian democracy. Let's watch a clip of Karina Gould, Minister of Democratic Institutions.
We have had several discussions with all of the platforms to varying degrees of success, I would say, in terms of how they plan to protect Canadians and our electoral process in the upcoming election. And we have not really seen that much progress. There's a lot left to be desired in terms of how seriously they're taking these issues. You know, we continue to engage with them and continue to have conversations, but you know, I'm not feeling great about where we are right now.
And Karina Gould did say that they've seen more action taken by some of these same companies to satisfy demands in other jurisdictions. For example, the European Union, where she says the same companies are doing more than they're offering to do in Canada. Although we know there are frustrations around the world with some of these companies. And of course, Britain today introducing a new white paper suggesting some much harsher controls on big social media platforms like Twitter and Pinterest and all of the others. In Canada, one point that was made is that we're already, of course, less than 6 months from our own federal election. There are no signs of the same scale of foreign interference as we saw in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The CSE, Canada's Communication Security Establishment, doesn't believe that Canada's election will be targeted to the same extent. And also they said that the infrastructure of Canada's election itself is mostly secure, partly because it's a paper-based voting system, that the interest and effort is increasingly focused on the voter, swaying voters' opinions, rather than aiming at political parties or voting systems.
Evan, thank you. That is the CBC's Evan Dyer in Ottawa. For more now, we bring it back to Ottawa and NDP MP Charlie Angus. He is the Vice Chair of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. So, Mr. Angus, I want to begin with the new report from the CSE that says Canada is a target to foreign cyber interference ahead of this year's election. What do you make of that?
Well, our Ethics Committee has done extensive work on the threat posed by third-party actors to platforms like Facebook, to the rising level of extremism that's being caused by the way news is spread through YouTube and Facebook. And we've had very little pickup from the government. So we're now a couple months out from the election and the government saying, oh my, you know, we could be subject to the same kind of manipulation that we saw in Brexit, that we saw with the US elections. The threat to the electoral process is clear, but it's also the rising levels of extremism that are directly linked to the way that Facebook, YouTube, Twitter have set up their business practices. And this is why we need to make sure that this isn't just voluntary compliance and hoping they'll be nice, but we have a right to insist that these companies respect the norms of a civilized society.
And so how do you do that? Do you do that with a British-style regulation regime or agency that oversees and that has the ability to enforce?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that, you know, we were in the UK in November with representatives from democracies around the world who were fed up with the lack of corporate accountability from Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg didn't even show up. We're going to have even more international regulators come to Ottawa in May for a similar committee set of hearings. The issue is that countries are having to take action. When you see, live streaming of mass murder on Facebook, as what happened in Christchurch, and those connections between rising extremists all over the world who are using these platforms, and up till now, no accountability from YouTube, no accountability from Twitter, Facebook. Regulation is coming, and it may be much harsher in some countries than others. It may be unfair in some countries, but I really throw this at the Silicon Valley giants. They have refused to take responsibility. They're forcing legislators to take action. We need to do this in Canada in a fair manner, but this is the direct result of criminal corporate behavior that's put maximizing profits at the expense of social community and the rising radicalization that's resulted.
Well, what do you make of today's announcement by Facebook, for instance, that they are in fact banning far extreme groups and individuals from their platform?
Well, I think that's a positive first step. Listeners and viewers should just remember, just a few years ago, there wasn't a single person of Muslim background who could go on TV without being asked about radicalization and steps to stop radicalization. But we've had none of that conversation about the threat of neo-Nazi, white supremacist radicalization that is working around the world and has resulted in numerous attacks, numerous murders. So, we shut down ISIS videos through enormous international effort. We need to be able to say that this kind of extremism has no place. But to get to the point of Facebook and YouTube, their actual business model is set up on feeding people more and more extremist content because it actually keeps them on the line. So we've seen a rise of extremist content and extremist behavior because their business model benefits from it. And that's where these issues of corporate accountability, particularly with Facebook, but Twitter and YouTube and Google, we need to put them in the frame and say, you have to start abiding by some principles, and we will maybe have to legislate you to do that.
Well, is that not what the Liberal minister responsible for this was saying today, that she doesn't see these social media platforms going in the right direction? So are you already there? Is the NDP already there saying there needs to be legislation, regulation, some kind of body that oversees and that is able to penalize these companies when this material gets online?
Well, it's interesting. It was actually representatives of the Liberal, Conservative, and New Democratic parties at the Ethics Committee who made 2 reports of recommending the government take action on this and say the days of just hoping that they'll do the nice thing isn't sufficient. We brought Minister Gould to our committee and said, why have you ignored our reports? And she was still saying, well, we want to talk to them and be nice with them. Now she's saying, well, it's not getting her anywhere. Well, geez, go figure. So there are parliamentary reports in Canada that are talking about the need for a clear regulator, clear accountability, and particular the mass power of Facebook, YouTube. They are such the ability of those companies to distort social conversation are so much greater than some small startup. We have to put greater emphasis on actually holding them to account, and that's what we've got an all-party principle on. We just have a government that hasn't been willing to follow through.
Why not? Why do you think this government hasn't been willing to follow through?
Well, I've seen with this government a very unhealthy close relations with the big lobbyists from Google, Amazon, Facebook, and I think they see themselves as the cool kids of 2008 when the internet was this really fun, innovative place. Well, now it's become a much darker place, and companies like Google aren't the fun kids anymore. They are some of the largest corporate power that we've seen in the history of the world, and they're data mining our lives. There's a level of extremism, and we have very little control over how these platforms are being used. So I would suggest to the government that welcome to 2019. We need to start putting some levels of accountability to hold them to account and to lessen the rising alienation, social conflict that's resulting in extremism. Do
you worry, though, about an agency overseeing in terms of freedom of expression, those concerns that there could be overreach?
Well, I was a digital utopian for many years. I thought that the internet was going to create this democratic state where everyone could talk, but I can see how easy it is to manipulate. I can see in my own communities how falsehoods and anti-immigrant bias just sweeps across Facebook with like some kind of, you know, black plague of hate. And I've seen no accountability from corporate leadership. So we need to put some measures to protect citizens in, and that's going to be a conversation that we need to have as a nation, but I think we're well past the time to move.
Charlie Angus, good of you to take the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Charlie
Angus is an Ontario NDP MP and Vice Chair of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics.